My guests today are Kristen Fink and Ginger Montazon, longtime colleagues in a private school in the Minneapolis area. Ginger had urged Kristen for years to open a school, which finally happened in 2022 when Kristen founded Scola Microschool in Roseville, Minnesota, and Ginger joined as the founding teacher. I had a chance to visit and meet Kristen and Ginger recently during a trip to see education entrepreneurs throughout the Twin Cities area, and I'm so delighted to have them here today. Ladies, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you, Kerry. It's really great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Ginger, I want to start with you because it seems like in some ways you may have spotted in Kristen a future education entrepreneur before maybe she even spotted it in herself. I know when we met, you talked about at one point putting a Post-it note on her desk one day after school saying, if you ever start a school, bring me along, or something along those lines. Tell us about that. What did you see in Kristen? What were you hoping she might do someday?
Yeah, well, Kristen has a way of having an idea, sparking creativity, and you just want to go along with it. You want to be part of it. And it was one of those days where I was in a staff meeting, which we all have those frustrating staff meetings, where I just felt like I wasn't able to really do my job as an educator, to really come alongside students and authentically meet them where they're at, whatever it was that day. I don't remember specifically, but I remember just on a Post-it writing, Kristen, please start your own school. I will come and work for you. And this was 15 years ago. And I put it on her computer. So, fast forward about 13 years after that, when Kristen starts coming up with this idea of starting Scola.
Oh, I just love that. And so, Kristen, had the idea of starting a school been percolating since that Post-it note, or was it really the pandemic that first kind of gave you the idea to really do something different?
Well, I have to be really honest that I kind of live my life off of Post-it notes. I invest in them, and so there's a chance I actually didn't see that one amidst all of the thousands of Post-it note. I think I'm just a natural idea generator. That's who my parents are. My dad's an inventor, right? So I kind of live in this like idea generation type of home and childhood. And even I'm just so proud to have worked at the school I did, where my principal really saw that as a gift in me and gave me a lot of chances to let some of those ideas come to fruit. I think though, when it comes to like the actual bones on Scola, I always knew that I had some educational leadership things within me, and I loved I loved the combo of being really gritty and in the teaching profession, like really close working with students, getting them from A to B and then on to C, and then many times they go on to D, E, and like I loved that process of learning in a classroom. But I also knew, like sitting in some of these staff meetings, Ginger talked about, I also loved the interaction with colleagues and dreaming up of a better system or a better way, or all of the educational theories. I loved being in there, knowing that you kind of have to start with those conversations before you can get practical with any of it. And I think Ginger and I, just being colleagues for a long time, we both knew that our almost opposite giftings really complemented each other. And I think we grew a deep trust for each other. And so it's highly complimentary, right? That someone would write that Post-it note to you. And yet I think that just was always in me. I just always knew that I ran my classroom in a really innovative way. I ran the middle school teaching team that Ginger was a part of, that I was leading. I ran that in a really innovative way. But to just have a partner that believes in you, speaks so clearly about that to you. But it really wasn't until about 2022, maybe 2021. Yeah, I would say the pandemic actually started really putting bones and structure around what Scola could look like.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that. What was your motivation and your vision for Scola around 2021?
Yeah, I had 2 young children at the time, so I just wanna give credit that I think when you see your own kids going through, and Ginger had a daughter who was a student of mine, and so there were often times where I'd hear her perspective as a teacher, but also as a parent. Right? You're wanting the right challenge for your own kids. You don't want to, like, curate this utopia or perfect environment. You need a little bit of conflict and grit, in their life, and you want them rubbing shoulders with diversity and people who are different and who think different. And yet at the same time, you want the main stuff to be the main stuff for your kids and also for me as a teacher. So I I think in that I just grew so frustrated with the trajectory after the pandemic. Teaching through the pandemic was really hard. It was like it was crazy hard. And I think I remained hopeful. Um I don't think I was teaching afraid or like frustrated. I think I had this really hopefulness about me, but I came back being like, okay, this is our shot to do something different. Like, finally, now everyone knows the fault lines that have been in education to begin with. Like, here we are. We all know that learning is not the center. And now we can build something because we all know all teachers want to get back to learning being the center. And this old system just isn't working. So I had this really hopeful attitude during pandemic teaching that then I think when I carried back afterwards, just hoping for some changes. And it was a really clear reality that the main purpose was just to get back to how it was. And so um, that really propelled. I think at that point, I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen in this space I'm in. I had a wonderful community. I loved my colleagues. My kids were enrolled in the school I was at, but I just had this hope that I couldn't let go, that it could be done differently, and it was going to be exciting, and it was going to center around the pieces that were the most important to me.
I would just add that how it was, going back to that, like, was really working and is really working for a lot of educators and a lot of students. Like, it is checking the box for some students and some families. And I recognize after the pandemic, boy, was there a shift in me personally as a professional, as a person, as an educator, so that when I went back to my same space, same classroom, and knew that it just, oh, this isn't fitting me anymore. And so then I tried, I worked at a different school for a year, and it's like, oh, wait, I thought this was going to fit me, and it still wasn't fitting me. And that's when I recognized, oh, there's a shift in me as a teacher, as an educator, that these old spaces are just not fitting me anymore. So Kristen started talking. We would meet for walks still, even though we're working at separate schools. And she started talking about this idea. Ginger, what do you think? I really, her 2 kiddos, she wanted to be in the driver's seat of their education, but also wanting to earn some income for her family. So what do you think about me homeschooling my own kiddos and maybe bringing 10 other kiddos along and, charging some money to earn some income? Kristen, you totally can do that. No problem. You would have families that would sign up for that. And slowly but surely it became, what do you think about 24 students and maybe bringing on another educator? Kristen, absolutely. You could create that space. There's another educator that would want to come alongside. And then it was, Ginger, what do you think about being that person? And finally, it became clear that the role that I was in, and it took me a while because my previous school I was at for over 2 decades. So to just be 1 year at an institution I'm loyal. So it just felt like that's not what I had planned. But saying yes to this opportunity was amazing, or is amazing, I should say.
Oh, I just love that. Yeah. And of course, this was a time when pandemic pods had become popular. And I know, Kristen, you had said that you were running sort of a modified pandemic pod during the early school closure period for your kids and some family members and neighbors just sort of informally gathering together and doing some curriculum with some different age learners. And so that may have also planted the seeds, I would imagine, for, well, let's just continue homeschooling with ever larger groups until we get to 24 students who are at Scola, technically homeschooled, but they're attending Scola as sort of a full-time schooling alternative that's really focused on individualized learning, mastery-based learning, and lots of time outside. So I want to get to curriculum and kind of the philosophy of the school in a minute, but I'd love to just hear briefly, maybe Kristen, what was the startup process like? How did you recruit families? How did you locate space? How did you begin to create a school?
Yeah, I think the first part of getting this on is we organized as a nonprofit, and I know that there are other ways to do a for-profit thing, but in my mind, that was kind of the only option that made sense to that was going to fit what we wanted to do. We were going to do this out of my parents' home, and that's where we're recording today. They essentially built a duplex. So they live on the top floor and they have a full functioning kind of separate home underneath. And so we called up the city, we called up the zoning officer,
I'm just gonna pause for if I can interrupt.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
all of this is happening. We're both working full time in the classroom. So we would meet, like when we reflect, we're like, wait, when did we meet?
When did we do this?
And it would be like Saturday mornings, or over the weekend, we'd pick a time to meet and we'd like just make up a checklist of like, okay, what do you think comes next? This is what I'm gonna do. You contact. So just to give you a little bit more perspective on the win, like we were both working full time,
working a full time
making
teaching
checklist of what needs to be done to open the fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we contacted the city officer, and and he thought this was a great idea. He was all for it, and but this type of stuff, this type of micro school, which at the time we didn't even really know that what this name even meant to us. I just knew I wanted a small school. So, and we just realized that we were going to have to sit in some city meetings before we could get this house idea really approved and off the ground. And so we kind of we hit a crossroads probably in February. So only a month later, when we really started leaning into this, about a month later, we heard our first big no from this house idea. And I remember sitting, and my husband runs his own company too. And I just remember having that like pop the balloon feeling, right? Like the air just gets sucked out and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's all it. And I remember my husband telling me like, babe, you're going to have quite a few of these. So you got to keep, like, this is like, give it another shot. Like maybe there's another idea out here. Maybe it's a no to this, but it doesn't have to be a no to the whole thing. But every one of those beginning steps feels that weighty, right? It just feels you're just in such unknown territory. And let me just say that I think this is when I found your podcast, actually, is kind of in those first few moments. And I think what was so helpful was you give such amazing, wide and deep exposure to different founders and how they make it possible. And so you all of a sudden don't feel very alone. Like, oh, there's other options to do this. And we had worked with a legal team to get all of our nonprofits set up, and they really recommended we just find a local church. And so we just made a list of churches, and one of the Saturdays we would call, and we did have a connection. One of the families that was interested in attended. Their church seemed like just a really good fit. And so we met with the pastor, we met with their governing board. And again, you're kind of presenting this like really put together idea, but you're like, we don't know what we're doing. They would have these questions and you would be like, well, this is the first time I'm answering that question because we haven't thought about that yet. Or, but working with this church, they have been so great at understanding kind of just how innovative and unique this is. They set up such a good communication process. So we found our rental, and I think the governing board at this church voted in April.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we were waiting. There was a period between February to April where we were like, I think we're going to keep moving on, even though we don't have a space. And I just want other founders to hear that, because I think finding the location is just one of those giant hurdles in the process of getting something started. And that waiting is incredibly vulnerable and takes an incredible amount of courage to just keep putting some other pieces together, even though you don't have that big one in place. So we meet at this wonderful location right in the city, and our location is at a corner of a suburb. Well, we're at a corner where 4 different cities meet, and so we kind of brag each day. We do spend a lot of time outside, and we go on walks. So we kind of have this bragging point that we walk to 3 different cities every day, because we're right on this cool corner. I think after we set up in April, that when we finally got the location, that's where we really started to start the recruitment process and really getting families on board. Oh man, I would talk to a new family through Zoom, kind of explain to them this idea. And we met with so many people that were so gracious, but what does it take to actually sign up for something that doesn't exist yet? Right? You're asking people for their kids and their money. Like it's this huge, vulnerable, like, here it is. And do you trust this?
Do you trust us is ultimately what it came down to, is, do you trust us?
Yeah.
And casting a vision where they're like, yes, we trust the 2 of you.
And our operational budget, we started budgeting so that everything worked well with 24 students. And Ginger and I really didn't come up with a contingency plan. It was kind of like 24 or bust. And in hindsight, maybe we should have thought a little bit more about that, but we just went for it. And by June, we had 6 students, but we probably had like 30 out there that might matriculate, and but it came down to August and we had 16, and just this was going to be we came to another crossroads.
Yep.
And I think we held a couple open houses, right? People coming into the space that we had, listening to our voices in that space really helped. But it was, we were stuck at kind of this 18
Yep.
place. You want to tell the rest of the story?
We were. And so between the 2 of us, we had to decide, okay, what's the bottom line as far as what we were, able to do income wise to get paid. In the month of August, did we bring, I think there is maybe 3 more.
Yeah.
3 more students that joined. So we opened with 21 students, which we felt so excited about. And that first year, we had 3 other students join during the school year. And I think every student that first year, there was some personal touch point. So either we had known their family through a previous school that we worked at, or our husbands kind of worked with the family. So there was some sort of personal touch point that we were able to bring them in. But it was that month of August, and we did all of the work. There was kind of nothing left to do as far as just kind of wait, which felt weird for the both
it felt
of us.
so weird
to just wait to see, like, are we going to get more students? We put everything out there that we could, and sure enough, that first year we had enough to make ends meet and get paid our first paycheck, and we got paid. That was exciting. It's like, we're doing it. Like, did you get a paycheck? Yeah, I got a paycheck too. Like, it just was thrilling.
Yeah, and it just shows the amount of sort of personal and financial risk that entrepreneurship takes, right? That you would both quit your jobs. You were banking on this new school working and having a full enrollment, and you just sort of have to wait and see. And that just must have felt so scary and, like you said, so vulnerable.
Yeah, we did both come from financially secure homes where our other partner had something coming in and was willing to take the risk with us, right?
Absolutely.
Our spouses, I think they were so ready. I think after pandemic teaching, both of our husbands were like, help my wife come back alive again. I think they were seeing the spark and the fire and the passion inside of us. And there is something really special that money can't buy when you see someone totally just in flow. They're using their gifts and meeting the challenge in the right way. And so we were in a really privileged spot to be able to take this risk. And I think Costco was our backup. Like,
Yep.
we'd just go work there.
Box store to
So,
work at for a bit.
yeah, but the amount of, I think we meet with other educators quite often. And I think the two words that come to mind that we just say over and over to them is the amount of courage and vulnerability. It's unlike any other thing. The only way I can describe it is to those who have had newborns before, and just that sheer courage and vulnerability to do all those small things behind the scenes that are really hard. So those are kind of the two words that keep popping up.
I love that. Courage and vulnerability. Ginger, I wonder if you can talk about the curriculum approach, sort of the educational philosophy of School of Microschool.
Yeah, and being in the more of a self-contained classroom for so many years for me, and the way I'm wired in my personality, actually having like a set checklist, set curriculum, set materials brought really a false sense of security to me as a teacher. Like, I felt really accomplished when I could check those boxes, when an administrator or another teacher could come on into my classroom and see a well-managed, well-maintained classroom. And in and of themselves, none of those things are bad, but it really was post pandemic where those things just for me were not fitting. So stepping into this, the risk for me was really trusting, all right, kids intrinsically want to learn. And when you empower them, like, the sky is the limit. Like, knowing that research backs it up, knowing that play and outdoor nature is so important. So stepping into this, it really was letting go of a set curriculum and really leaning into letting the kids lead their learning. Now, what that looks like for us, because we've been educators for so long, there is a wealth of resources that I have available to me as far as Teacher Pay Teacher, as far as different curriculums I've used. Stepping into this, a previous school I taught at, they were so generous and donated a ton of beautiful books that we're able to use on a day-to-day basis. So that was the biggest trusting, I think, for a lot of families when they ask specifically, what math curriculum are you using? What reading curriculum are you using? And we are like, not a specific one, but we really do cater to the students who are in front of us. And we do our best to curate the best resources to meet students where they're at. And it wasn't until stepping into this, I mean, that probably for me was my biggest fear. Like, I take this role as educator, obviously very, very, I want to make sure that I'm checking those boxes. So to let that go and trust that A, students intrinsically want to learn, and B, like, between the two of us, we have a ton of resources that we can use. And watching students step up and succeed in that framework has just blown my mind what they're able to do, and learning how to come alongside of students and really coach them versus just being the stand up front and tell students.
Yeah, and outside time, walks. I know your students are walking. What is it, a couple miles typically a day? I know that when I visited, Ginger, you said that you not only feel sort of personally fulfilled and rewarded as a teacher at School of Microschool, but you also feel healthier. Just being outside as a teacher, it's good for you in the same way that it's good for the kids to be outside moving their bodies and interacting with nature. I wonder if you can share a little bit about your vision for nature immersion.
Absolutely. It first started just getting, our goal year one was to get them outside as much as possible. So just that fresh air, and we're in the Minneapolis area, so our winters are hard, but kids wear the right gear and they are outside for, an hour, sometimes over an hour, depending on what the temperature is in those winter months. And what we see and what families are telling us, kids are content. Like, they're happy, they're ready to dive into more of a rigorous academic cycle after they've spent time outside. For me personally, I am just a happier person when I get outside, when I get fresh air, even on those cold days or even days when it's drizzling outside and we get outside. For me, my well-being, I'm a happier person. And we know this about education and about educators. When educators are well, when they're taking care of themselves, it really does trickle down into what the students are able to do. And so this year with nature, we took on nature journaling. So students have a waterproof nature journal and a utensil, writing utensil that will go outside. There are 3 different spots where they pick a place and they just sit. And for like 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the day, depending on the weather, they would pick a spot and they would just draw a picture. They would maybe label the picture, and then we'd walk to the next spot and do that. So it really is a practice of just stilling your mind and your body and the practice of noticing what's around you.
I love that. So
I think, can I add to that?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Oh, please. Yeah.
I think part of this is Ginger and I got to grow with our students in this habit. I think outside was always it was always something that I knew was good, right? And I would have called myself an outdoorsy person for sure, camping, biking, but not to the degree where it was so intentional that you're actually like carving out a goal amount of time every day, right? Or not as intentional as like 2 teachers who are actually seeing the time outside with kids as part of the research of knowing those kids, watching their communication patterns, watching their problem solving patterns, like really seeing that as a classroom. And so it kind of went from me, and I'd say Ginger too, like we'd probably call ourselves outdoorsy, but now we're actually like researchers and turned into, we see the outdoors as a classroom. And that shift was something that Ginger and I didn't have before Scola. And now I just see it as such a gift. And part of it was, I think we tapped into a little bit of the research. You know, I think you do this a lot as a teacher where you'll go through these professional developments. You'll hear these like really wise people who have spent a ton of time researching this topic that connects to brain science or the best way of learning. You read these books. I read that Last Child in the Woods, you know, and then listened to a lot of Peter Gray. He was a good starting point to research some of this outdoor play. We follow Ginny Urich. She does 1,000 hours outside, just a simple movement to track those things. So you'd hear all of these like research pieces and you're like, yeah, duh, you know, like, of course, of course, we all do better with fresh air and sunshine and moving our body and letting nature really inform our day and our own personal health. Switching that though into like it being a good idea, and we all agree, into actually like making it into a classroom. I think that has been like one of the greatest joys because I've got to grow into that just with my students. I wasn't the teacher that already knew this worked. And here's now all my students that I want to teach how to be outside. This was like something when we started. Ginger and I were at ground zero, just like our students were in kind of this movement and this effort. And I cannot tell you, I still sometimes don't always have the words to describe how absolutely crucial it is to brain science and children learning, to their mental and emotional health, to their physical well-being, because I also see it in me. I am like cognitively more sharp. I'm feeling my best self, my moods, my attitude, but also, so the way that I'm growing in all of the different capacities that I have is because I'm a teacher in an outdoor classroom too. And this is not all day, right? That Minnesota doesn't really afford us to be an all day outside. Although I do know that there are schools like that exist, and I love reading about them and hearing what they do. But we started buying materials that can be outside. We started really prioritizing this. And I would have never believed this, but it is really odd whenever we don't get 2 hours and 45 minutes outside during a school day. Like, and we all feel it, right? Like, I think our students like they're like, ugh, what's different about, oh yeah, we're under 2 hours and 45 minutes,
It's just amazing.
And so,
And I think something that's surprising too, well, has surprised me as we watch our youngest learners and the stamina that just grows. The first, couple weeks of school might be a little tiring to walk to the park, and then they need a little break, or maybe they're in the wagon as we're walking to the park. A month in, when we ask
yes.
for a volunteer to go ahead and pull the wagon, it's the youngest learners. It's the 5 and 6 year olds that like, I'll pull the wagon. Let me, I want to turn. So I think just when you don't put the limits on only this age can do it or not quite yet, it's amazing. They surprise me pretty much every day with what they step up to.
It's just amazing. I read recently that the average recess time for elementary school students in the US is 25 minutes a day. And so then to hear that your students who range from kindergarten to eighth grade are getting 2 hours and 45 minutes outside, no wonder students and teachers are happier in that kind of environment and are healthier and are more ready to learn and to be their best selves. So just remarkable what you've been able to create. So tell me about how families or what is attracting families to Schola Microschool, both in its early stages and then today. Are these families who had been homeschooling prior to COVID? Are they coming from conventional classrooms? Who are they and why are they attracted to your program?
Yeah, I'd be interested what you think, but I think we kind of have a good mix, honestly.
Yes.
I would say the majority, at least 50% from conventional classrooms, but we had a few students that were doing online, um, online public school. Minnesota actually has a really great online public school offering, and but just needed that like to rub shoulders with other students, kind of more in relationships. Um, Quite a few from private schools, but in a conventional setting. I think now it's starting to shift where we're really getting, probably our biggest enrollment was with younger kids, where this is actually going to be the school that they know. Does that make sense? So we're kind of now into that second wave of the students that are coming with us actually don't bring any past school experience with them. We get to be kind of their first touch point in what school looks and sounds and feels like. So
Yeah, I think there's a few things that families are attracted to. I think one of them is the homeschool model. So we really have a lot of families where both parents are working. They want to provide a homeschool type setting, but they're not able to provide it. So that we do that. I think there's also families who you touched on recess only being at 25 minutes. They really want their kids to be kids and be able to play and be outside more. I think there's other families who are drawn to us because yes, academics as a school, academics super important. We want to make sure that kiddos are ready for grade level work. I think parents are attracted to not a heavy focus where kids feel burdened, where they feel like they have to, prepare for this standardized test, which means what to them kind of thing. So there's not a lot of pressure when it comes to academics. I also think parents are really excited about the opportunity for their kiddo to work outside of their grade level. So
Mm.
maybe they're bumping up 1, 2, 3. Like it really is being multi-age. A lot of kids don't even know. We tried not to use specific grades because it doesn't really matter. We really want to meet kids where they're at and challenge them where they need to be challenged and also give them opportunities to grow in areas that they need to grow in.
I just love that. I'm hearing from founders across the country similar themes, so that they may have some students coming from conventional classrooms, either public or private, but that most of their growth is happening kind of at that kindergarten level where families are opting out of conventional schooling right out of the gate and are choosing an alternative. And thankfully, we have entrepreneurs like you that are creating those alternatives and enabling, students to be able to learn and grow outside of a conventional classroom. So just really exciting trends. I think you're right, Kristen. This is sort of the next wave of this movement is, families realizing that they have options from kindergarten onward. And that sort of gets me to my next question for you both is, what's next for Scola? I would imagine you have families saying, can you please do a high school program, or can you please get larger than 24 students because we want our kids to go there. Tell us a little bit about what's next for Scola and how else you're supporting school founders who want to create similar programs.
Yeah. I mean, this is also where Ginger and I are really good partners, because I'm kind of the dreamer that goes soaring and flying, and Ginger really helps me stay true to our why and our values and what we're doing. So I think there's kind of a partnership. So I hope you hear both of our voices in this one too. I have been so delightfully surprised in the amount of educators that have reached out to us, just in even being 2 years open. I think a lot of this does come down to being a seasoned educator, kind of in this field, right? So Ginger and I both came in with almost 40 years of experience. And so there's just kind of a veteran teacher feel when you talk to us, and kind of knowing both sides, all sides of the coin, as far as some education practices. We've had we've had 15 educators reach out to us over 2 years of being open. Most of these just start out as an email. Hey, I found your website, and this just strikes something in me as a teacher. Can I talk to you? And some of them simply are just teachers that want to stay in their spot, but just need a little boost of inspiration, something like that. The majority of them, though, are looking for a shift or a change. And so we've had a few who have come to visit and watch our day in motion. Most of them have the same questions. One of the biggest ones is like, how does this work? How in the world do you teach this, like, different grade levels at the same time? So, and sometimes you can put words on that, but there's just something special about getting your feet in someone else's space. I know as a teacher, when there were kind of two things that a little bit contradict each other. I would have observers come to me, right? People who were really wise in the field, and I appreciated their feedback, but they're watching me teach in my own space. I also am so glad I got the opportunity to go into masterful teacher classrooms and watch them work in what they're doing, right? And I would say, honestly, as a teacher, the second impacted me more as an educator, when I would step into someone else's space and watch a master teacher do what they do well. And it would always impact my teaching. I was always able to kind of shift that and mold that in a way that would help me the most. And so we really would like to be a model school. And actually, I should probably rephrase that. I think we are a model school. I think we're doing the work of being a demonstration facility. Teachers reach out to us. We're working on creating a tiered system where a teacher or a potential founder, they can kind of tap into us as educators, also use some of the resources. There are some times where it's so helpful, like listening to other founders on your podcast, Kerry. Just even listening to someone else's process helps you in your own, helps you kind of know what step to take next, or like, oh yeah, this one is really hard. This step is really hard in the process. I don't need to be discouraged. And so, yeah, we are coming up kind of right now with our model school tiered system of how we can really impact other educators to get started in their own space.
We are also bumping up enrollment just a little bit in the process of hiring a third part-time teacher to kind of carry the workload. And between the two of us and working with our board, just really something, and I didn't say this as far as why families are attracted, there's something really special about small, and the vulnerability that happens when you're multi-age and small. So willing to bump it up a little bit, but also really want to protect for us. And again, we're just speaking about Scola and the community that we're working with. Small is really special, so wanting to protect that.
Yeah, and you've also introduced a summer camp. I think, did you say this is the first year that you've run a summer camp program?
Yeah, yep. This is our first trial at it.
Yeah. And so you have some Scola students, but you also have others from the community. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what made you decide to do a summer camp, and how does that fit into kind of your larger education entrepreneurship plan?
Yeah. Um, we have a pretty typical school calendar. So starting after Labor Day, ending around Memorial. Um, and it's been awesome. I think Ginger and I are still learning kind of how to enjoy the new routines and rest even that we feel. I feel like a really rested teacher.
Mm.
And I'm getting used to that. But a lot of that is how we're prioritizing teacher health, because that in turn directly impacts kids. Um, and we can talk about that at a different time, but I think this summer program is like that too. I probably shouldn't have called it a camp. We call it more of a summer session because we actually run. We do not include direct instruction, but we include every other piece of what we do during the school year.
Mm.
So we actually have a handful. I'm in kind of our location of our summer session, and we have kids downstairs. They're reading, they're writing, they're creating, they're doing art, they're nature journaling. So all of the pieces that we do during a week of Scola, they're doing downstairs right now where we're at, and we're in week 2. We decided just to start 3. Again, I think just kind of chewing off some things of what feels doable, what still promotes teacher health. Both Ginger and I love summers. And
You
so,
got to soak them up in Minnesota.
Yes.
um, but I noticed with my own kids, especially if our school year is going to end around Memorial Day and not start until Labor Day, that's a long summer. And even me, I do better with a little bit of routine, at least some touch points of it. My kids do better with a little bit of structure. And so just kind of having 2 weeks of Scola summer session right after school's done. We did them early in June, pretty close to the end of our year. And then we have one in August to kind of ramp up into the fall. And yeah, they're well attended. It's our first kind of trial, so we'll just get better as we go. But it's been really fun. And I think, I mean, mentally, Ginger and I were even just talking. I don't know if my mind has like officially started summer yet, but we will. And I'm just not nervous that I'm going to get the rest and the summer that I need, even with kind of doing these camps. And I think a lot of that is because we prioritize teacher health. If Ginger and I are healthy, that's going to really impact our students in a good way.
I love the intentionality that you bring to Scola in not only your current operations, but in sort of thinking about additional programming or now offering these new tiered services for prospective founders who want to use Scola as their kind of lab school or demonstration school. I think that that's really, really exciting. So what advice, besides being sort of intentional, what advice would you have for prospective founders thinking about getting a new school or space off the ground?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind, Scola, we started out knowing our why, kind of thinking about who we wanted to be as educators, then who our potential families would be. So I think thinking about, okay, what is it that you have to offer as an educator? What are you bringing to the table? And being really confident in your why, like knowing that ahead of time. And the reality is, I cannot be all things to everybody. Scola is not all things to every family. So recognizing that you're not going to be a fit for every family, but really thinking through who are the families that you're going to want to bring to the table.
I love that.
I am just so glad that I have a partner, and I think it can show up in different ways. I do know that there are situations of founders who don't have just like a colleague side by side, but there was a real chance I was going to do this by myself. I mean, our first walks around the lake, I was just sharing Ginger what I was going to do by myself with 12 kids, and I'm just so glad that it shaped up differently where I have a partner by my side. And I've heard from a few other founders, through just some of the networking that we have done. The ones who are pulling this alone, I think are still finding some fulfillment, but are just experiencing it differently, right? And so I would give advice or encouragement to anyone who's interested. as much as you can, find a partner. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean it can come through different ways, right? Like our governing board, I can't tell you how many times I actually love going to our governing board meetings. I finding people that you can really help you carry this in a way, right? And they can hear that side of it. I'm just so glad that I have Ginger, and we work really well together. So I understand that when you find someone that doesn't work well with you, I'm sure it's a different issue. But there are a lot of like-minded people who want education to work, right? And I think people who are willing to go through that season of courage and vulnerability with you, and to just ask someone to kind of help you partner and carry it with you. So that would be my advice is make sure you're not doing this alone. And there are huge networks of people. We've had one of our favorite founders to work with. She has this school, McPhail Academy in Louisville, and we just love tapping in to Jasmine and what she's doing, and just finding people. I think this is what's awesome about your podcast, right? Is just knowing you're not alone. Just recognizing that there are other people who can encourage you and lift you up.
You've been so generous to encourage founders to reach out to you and aspiring founders. So if my listeners and viewers want to learn more about Scola and connect with you potentially about some of your services to help new founders, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, good question. The first would just be to go to our website. It's www.scola, SKOLA, scolamicroschool.com. Also, I'm super proud of our Instagram posts, and I've chosen to just kind of pick Instagram and not do both Instagram and Facebook. They show up on Facebook, so you'll see them there too. But it just has been a great way for Ginger and I to kind of share behind the curtain a little bit of what happens in a day, the things that are on our mind. And so that's a really good way to reach out to us as well. But yeah, to start at our website, and then that will kind of bring us to our email and good ways to contact us.
I love that. Well, I hope listeners and viewers will reach out to you. And I know I'm looking forward to continuing to follow your progress and your efforts to inspire additional founders to get off the ground. So Ginger Montazon and Kristen Fink, thank you so much for being on the LiberatED podcast.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Kerry.
Thanks, Kerry.